The abandoned mare stood trembling in the headlights, her pregnant belly heaving as rain pelted her bleeding wounds, and Mike's 18-wheeler skidded toward her. His split-second decision to stop forever altered two broken lives, turning a midnight highway horror into something neither could have imagined. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go. The rain pounded mercilessly against the windshield of Mike Wilson's 18-wheeler as he squinted through the darkness, his wipers fighting a losing battle against the downpour. Interstate 40 stretched before him like a black river, the yellow lines barely visible through the sheets of water cascading across his path. It was just past midnight, and the storm that had been threatening all evening had finally unleashed its fury across the Tennessee countryside. Mike had been driving for nearly 14 hours, pushing the limits of his logbook to make his delivery on time. His eyes burned from fatigue, but the depot in Nashville was only another 70 miles away. Then he could finally crash in the sleeper cab and get some much-needed rest before heading back to Oklahoma the next day. Lightning flashed across the sky, illuminating the rural landscape for a brief, electric moment. In that flash, Mike saw something that made his heart leap into his throat, a large, dark shape standing motionless in the middle of his lane. "Jesus Christ," he shouted, slamming on the brakes and feeling the truck begin to hydroplane. The trailer fishtailed behind him as he fought the wheel, steering into the skid just as he'd been taught years ago. For a terrifying moment, he was certain the massive vehicle would jackknife across the highway, but somehow he managed to bring it under control, the truck finally shuddering to a halt mere feet from the mysterious obstacle. His heart hammering in his chest, Mike flipped on his high beams, and what he saw left him speechless. Standing there, completely still despite the roaring truck that had nearly struck her, was a mare. She was coal-black with a soaking wet coat that gleamed in the headlights. Her head was held high, ears pricked forward, eyes reflecting the light like twin moons in the darkness. But what struck Mike most was her swollen belly. She was heavily pregnant. "Where the hell did you come from, girl?" Mike muttered, reaching for his hazard lights and switching them on. The empty highway stretched in both directions, no farms or stables visible in the storm-drenched night. The nearest exit was miles back, and there were no other vehicles in sight. The mare hadn't moved, seemingly frozen in place by fear or exhaustion. Another bolt of lightning tore across the sky, followed almost instantly by a deafening crack of thunder. The horse flinched but remained rooted to the spot, her sides heaving with each breath. Mike knew he couldn't just leave her there. If another truck came barreling down the highway, she'd be killed instantly. And with that belly, she was carrying precious cargo. He'd grown up on a small farm in Oklahoma and knew enough about horses to recognize that this one was in trouble. Deep trouble. Grabbing his rain slicker from behind the seat, he pulled it on and stepped out into the deluge. The rain immediately plastered his thinning hair to his scalp and ran in rivulets down his face as he slowly approached the mare, keeping his movements deliberate and non-threatening. "Easy, girl. Easy now," he called softly, raising his voice just enough to be heard over the storm. "I'm not going to hurt you." The mare's nostrils flared as she caught his scent, and she pawed nervously at the wet asphalt. But she didn't bolt, which Mike took as a good sign. As he drew closer, he could see that she was trembling, whether from fear or cold or both. He couldn't tell. Her coat was crisscrossed with scratches, some fresh and bleeding, others older and crusted over. One particularly nasty gash ran along her left flank, still oozing. She'd been through hell, that much was clear. "What happened to you, beautiful?" Mike whispered, now close enough to touch her. He slowly extended his hand, palm up, letting her catch his scent. To his surprise, the mare lowered her head and nudged his palm gently. There was intelligence in those dark eyes, and something else. Trust, perhaps, or at least the desperate hope for help. "You've been around people before, haven't you?" he said. "You're somebody's horse. or you were. The mare's breathing seemed labored to Mike, and as another flash of lightning illuminated the scene, he noticed something that made his blood run cold. There was a thin rope around her neck, the end frayed and trailing down her shoulder. She hadn't simply wandered off. Someone had tied her up and left her, pregnant and vulnerable, to fend for herself. "Son of a bitch," Mike growled, anger replacing his initial surprise. "Who would do this to you?" The mare whinnied softly, as if in response, and then suddenly staggered sideways. Mike lunged forward, bracing his shoulder against her side to steady her. She was burning hot to the touch despite the cold rain, and he realized with a sinking feeling that she might be feverish from her wounds. "Okay, girl, we need to get you somewhere safe," he said, looking back at his truck. The empty trailer he was hauling was meant for dry goods, not livestock, but it would have to do. The challenge would be getting her into it. Mike had a length of rope in his cab for securing tarps, and he fashioned it into a makeshift halter. The mare accepted it without resistance, another sign that she was accustomed to human handling. Leading her slowly toward the back of his trailer, Mike wondered what he was getting himself into. His delivery schedule would definitely be shot now, and his boss wasn't known for his understanding nature, but looking at the mare's swollen belly and exhausted eyes, he knew he had no choice. It took nearly 20 minutes to coax her up the ramp and into the trailer. By then, they were both soaked to the skin, and Mike's boots squelched with every step. He secured the doors and climbed back into the cab, shivering as he peeled off his useless rain slicker. "Depot's not an option now," he muttered to himself, putting the truck in gear and slowly pulling back onto the highway. The nearest town with a veterinarian would be Lebanon, about 30 miles ahead. He just hoped the vet would be willing to come out in the middle of the night during a storm. As he drove, Mike's mind raced with questions. Who had abandoned this beautiful mare, and why? How long had she been wandering? And most importantly, was she going to be all right? He glanced in his side mirror at the trailer, feeling a strange sense of responsibility settling over him. For better or worse, their paths had crossed on this stormy night, and now their fates were intertwined. What Mike couldn't possibly know as he carefully navigated the rain-slicked highway was that this chance encounter would change the course of his life forever. The pregnant mare standing stoically in his trailer, fighting for her life and the life of her unborn foal, would lead him down a path he never could have imagined, a path of healing, purpose, and unexpected joy. But for now, all he could do was drive through the storm, hoping to find help before it was too late. The storm showed no signs of letting up as Mike navigated the slick roads toward Lebanon. Twice he had to slow to a crawl when the rain became so heavy he could barely see beyond his headlights. Every few minutes, he checked his mirrors, watching for any sign of distress from his unexpected passenger. The thought of the mare giving birth in the back of his trailer sent a wave of panic through him. He knew next to nothing about foaling, especially in these conditions. "Just hold on, girl," he murmured, as if she could hear him through the metal walls in the roaring storm. Mike's cell phone had only 1 bar of service, but it was enough. At a stoplight in Lebanon, he thumbed through the search results for emergency veterinarians and found Lakeside Animal Hospital. The website claimed 24-hour emergency service, but Mike had his doubts anyone would answer at nearly 1 a.m. To his surprise, the phone rang only twice before a tired female voice answered. "Lakeside Emergency. This is Dr. Sarah Morgan." "Thank God," Mike sighed with relief. "Doctor, my name's Mike Wilson. I'm a truck driver, and I just found a pregnant mare standing in the middle of I-40 during this storm. She's injured and looks like she might be running a fever. I've got her in my trailer, but I don't know what to do with her." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "You put a horse in a semi-trailer?" "It was that or leave her on the highway," Mike replied defensively. "She's got cuts all over and there's a rope around her neck like someone just tied her up and left her. Looks deliberate to me." The vet's tone changed immediately. "All right, where are you now?" Just reached Lebanon, heading east on Highway 70. Good. Take Highway 70 another 4 miles east. There's a turnoff for Cedar Creek Road. Take that north about 2 miles, and you'll see our emergency entrance on the right. It's a white building with blue trim. I'll meet you there in 20 minutes. Thank you, Doctor. I'm on my way. The directions were clear, but the journey seemed interminable. Each mile brought fresh worries. What if the mare collapsed? What if she was already in labor? By the time Mike spotted the low-slung building with its illuminated emergency entrance sign, his knuckles were white from gripping the steering wheel. A woman in a rain jacket stood beneath the overhang of the building, and as Mike carefully backed his trailer toward the loading area, she approached with a confident stride. Dr. Morgan was younger than he expected, probably in her mid-30s, with her dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. The lines of fatigue around her eyes suggested she'd already had a long night before his call. "Mr. Wilson?" she asked as he climbed down from the cab. "Mike," he corrected, extending his hand. "Thanks for coming out in this weather, Doctor." "Sarah," she replied, shaking his hand firmly. "Let's see what we're dealing with." Mike followed her to the back of the trailer and unlocked the doors. The mare was still standing, but her head hung low, and even Mike could tell her breathing was more labored than before. Sarah's expression remained professional, but Mike caught the brief flash of concern in her eyes. "Let's get her inside," she said quietly. It took both of them to coax the exhausted mare down the ramp and across the short distance to the clinic's equine entrance. Sarah had prepared a large stall with fresh bedding, and once inside, the mare seemed to sag with relief at being on solid ground again. Under the bright lights of the stall, the mare's condition looked even worse than Mike had realized. Her black coat was matted with blood in several places, and up close, the wound on her flank was clearly infected. The frayed rope around her neck had rubbed her skin raw, leaving an angry ring of inflamed tissue. Sarah worked methodically, checking the mare's vitals first. "Temperature's 103.2, she murmured, frowning. "Definitely infected." She ran her hands gently over the mare's swollen belly, feeling for the foal. "Baby seems active, which is good. I'd put her at about 10 months along, maybe a little more." "That's good, right?" Mike asked, hovering awkwardly at the edge of the stall. "It means we've got a little time before she foals, which we need. Her condition isn't great." Sarah continued her examination, speaking half to Mike and half to herself. Multiple lacerations, some infected. Rope burns around the neck, dehydrated, malnourished. She looked up at Mike with a grim expression. "Someone did this deliberately, then abandoned her. This wasn't an accident." Mike felt a surge of anger. Who would do something like that? "Unfortunately, I see more cases like this than I'd like to admit," Sarah replied, drawing an antibiotic into a syringe. "Some people view animals as disposable. When they become inconvenient or expensive, they just..." She trailed off, focusing on administering the injection with practiced ease. The mare accepted the shot without protest, as if she understood it was meant to help. Sarah moved on to cleaning the wounds, starting with the infected gash on the flank. "Could you hold her head, please? This might sting a bit." Mike stepped forward, gently taking hold of the makeshift halter he'd fashioned. The mare's eyes locked onto his, and he found himself murmuring softly to her as Sarah worked. "You're doing great, girl. We're going to take care of you now." Over the next hour, Sarah cleaned and treated each wound, applied antibiotic ointment, and started the mare on IV fluids to combat her dehydration. She removed the frayed rope and tended to the raw skin beneath it, her touch gentle but efficient. "She needs a name," Mike said suddenly, still stroking the mare's neck. "We can't just keep calling her Girl." Sarah looked up from where she was bandaging a particularly deep cut on the mare's hind leg. "Any ideas?" Mike studied the black mare thoughtfully. Despite everything she'd endured, there was a quiet dignity in the way she held herself, a resilience that reminded him of someone. "Mercy," he said finally. "I think we should call her Mercy." Sarah smiled, the first real smile he'd seen from her. "It fits," she agreed. "Strong but gentle." As if in response, Mercy nickered softly and pressed her muzzle against Mike's palm. The simple gesture sent an unexpected wave of emotion through him. This horse, who had every reason to distrust humans after what she'd been through, was choosing to trust him. "What happens to her now?" Mike asked, his voice rougher than he intended. Sarah straightened up, disposing of the used gauze in a nearby bin. "Legally, she's considered abandoned property. The sheriff's department will file a report, but if no one comes forward to claim her within a certain period, she'll go to a rescue organization or be put up for adoption." She hesitated, studying Mike's face. "These things can take time, though. She needs a safe place to recover and deliver her foal." "How long?" "A few weeks at minimum. The foal could come any time from now to a month from now, and Mercy will need proper care both before and after." Mike nodded slowly, a plan forming in his mind. He thought of his small farm back in Oklahoma, the empty stable that had stood unused since his father's horses had passed years ago. It would need work, but it was there, waiting. "I might know a place," he said quietly, meeting Sarah's questioning gaze. Dawn broke over Lebanon with a gentle pink glow, the storm having finally exhausted itself sometime in the early morning hours. Mike sat on a plastic chair outside Mercy's stall, his back aching and eyes gritty from lack of sleep. He'd called his dispatcher at 3 a.m., explaining the situation in what he knew sounded like a bizarre excuse for missing his delivery window. "A horse? You picked up a damn horse?" The dispatcher's incredulous voice had echoed through the phone. "A pregnant mare abandoned on the highway," Mike had replied, too tired to be apologetic. "She would have died if I'd left her there." There had been a long pause, followed by a heavy sigh. "Your load's already late. I'll reroute another driver to pick it up. Take the rest of the week as personal days. You've got them saved up, but Wilson, I swear to God, if this is some kind of—" "It's not. I'll send you pictures if you want. Don't bother. Just be back on the road by Monday." 4 days. Mike had 4 days to figure out what to do with Mercy and somehow get himself back to Oklahoma. He'd been mulling over the possibilities all night, and by morning, he'd settled on a plan. It wasn't perfect, but it was the best he could do. The sound of the clinic's side door opening pulled Mike from his thoughts. Sarah entered carrying 2 steaming cups of coffee. She'd left around 3 a.m. to catch a few hours of sleep before her regular appointments began, leaving Mike with instructions to call if Mercy's condition changed. "You're still here," she observed, handing him one of the cups. "I half expected you'd be gone by now." Mike accepted the coffee gratefully. "Couldn't leave her," he said simply, nodding toward Mercy, who was resting comfortably on the fresh straw. "Besides, I've been making some calls." Sarah leaned against the stall door, raising an eyebrow. "Oh?" "I've got a small farm in Oklahoma. It was my parents' place. They're gone now, but I kept it. There's a stable, pasture, everything she'd need." Mike took a sip of his coffee, organizing his thoughts. "My neighbor looks after the property when I'm on the road. He says he can help with Mercy and the foal if I can get them there." "That's quite a commitment," Sarah said carefully. "Horses aren't exactly low-maintenance pets." "She's not a pet," Mike replied, surprising himself with the conviction in his voice. I don't know what she is, but I can't just dump her in a rescue and drive away." Sarah studied him over the rim of her cup. "You've only known her for what, 8 hours? That's a pretty strong attachment for such a short time." Mike shrugged, embarrassed by his own intensity. "I know how it sounds. But when I saw her standing there in the rain with that rope around her neck, it was like she was waiting for me specifically, like it was meant to be. To his relief, Sarah didn't laugh. Instead, she nodded thoughtfully. I've seen it happen before. That instant connection between a person and an animal. Can't explain it, but it's real. So you don't think I'm crazy? Oh, I definitely think you're crazy, Sarah said with a smile that softened her words. But the good kind of crazy. The kind that makes the world a little better. Mike felt his face grow warm, unused to such direct praise. Well, crazy or not, I've got a plan. My buddy Jake has a horse trailer he's willing to loan me. He's driving it down from Oklahoma today, should be here by evening. If Mercy's stable enough to travel, we'll head back tomorrow morning. Sarah frowned slightly. That's a long journey for a pregnant mare who's just been through trauma. We'll take it slow, Mike assured her. Stop every couple hours, make sure she's comfortable. My dispatcher gave me until Monday to get back on the road. And your truck? You can't exactly pull a horse trailer with an 18-wheeler. Jake's bringing his pickup too. He'll drive the semi back, I'll take the pickup and trailer with Mercy. Sarah looked impressed. You've thought this through. Had all night to work on it, Mike replied with a wry smile. He hesitated, then added, but I could use some professional advice on what supplies I'll need, medications, that sort of thing. I can help with that, Sarah said. She paused, glancing at her watch. I have appointments starting in 30 minutes, but I'm free around lunchtime if you want to go over everything then. That would be great, thanks. Sarah nodded and pushed away from the stall door. In the meantime, why don't you go get some breakfast and maybe a few hours of sleep? There's a motel just down the road. Mercy will be fine here with my staff checking on her regularly. Mike knew she was right. He was running on fumes at this point, but the thought of leaving Mercy made him uneasy. Maybe I'll just close my eyes here for a bit, he said, settling back in the uncomfortable plastic chair. Sarah looked like she might argue, but then seemed to think better of it. Suit yourself. There's a shower in the staff room if you want to clean up. Second door on the left, down that hallway. Thanks, Doc, Mike said, grateful for her understanding. After Sarah left, Mike stood and approached Mercy's stall. The mare was awake now, watching him with those intelligent dark eyes. Her fever had broken overnight, and she seemed markedly improved from the pitiful creature he'd found on the highway. Morning, Mercy, he said softly. Looks like you and I are going on a road trip tomorrow. Mercy nickered softly and stretched her neck toward him. Mike reached out to stroke her velvety muzzle, marveling at how quickly she'd come to trust him. Or perhaps it wasn't trust yet, just the absence of fear. Either way, it felt like a victory. I've got a place for you, he continued, speaking in the low, gentle tone he discovered seemed to soothe her. It's nothing fancy, but there's good grass, clean water, and plenty of room for you and your baby. No one's going to hurt you there. As he spoke, he found himself wondering about Mercy's past. Who had owned her before? Had she been loved once before ending up abandoned on that highway? The rope burns suggested recent mistreatment, but her willingness to accept human contact hinted at a gentler history. Wish you could talk, he murmured. Tell me your story. Mercy blinked slowly, then lowered her head to nuzzle at his shirt pocket where he'd stashed a couple of sugar cubes swiped from the clinic's break room. Mike laughed, pulling one out for her. Smart girl, he said, as she delicately took the treat from his palm. Nothing wrong with your memory, is there? The simple interaction filled him with a surprising sense of purpose. In his 20 years of long-haul trucking, Mike had grown accustomed to solitude, to the rhythm of endless highways and changing landscapes viewed through a windshield. Human connections were brief and superficial, a nod to a fellow driver at a truck stop, a quick conversation with a diner waitress. Yet here was this horse, This vulnerable creature who had literally appeared in his path, creating a connection that felt deeper than anything he'd experienced in years. "We're going to be okay," he told her. And for the first time in a long while, he believed it might be true. After catching a few hours of fitful sleep in the uncomfortable chair, Mike finally took Sarah's advice and headed to the staff shower. The hot water revived him somewhat, washing away the grime of the previous night's adventure. He changed into the spare set of clothes he always kept in his truck: clean jeans and a faded blue button-down that had seen better days. When he returned to Mercy's stall, he found one of the vet techs checking her IV. The young woman introduced herself as Lori and gave him an update. "Dr. Morgan says she's doing remarkably well considering what she's been through," Lori told him, adjusting the fluid bag. "Her temperature's normal now and she's been eating and drinking. That's always a good sign." "What about the foal?" Mike asked. "Active and strong by all indications. Dr. Morgan did an ultrasound while you were asleep. Everything looks normal." Lori patted Mercy's neck affectionately. "She's a tough lady, this one." Mike felt a weight lift from his shoulders. He'd been more worried than he cared to admit. By noon, as promised, Sarah returned to go over Mercy's care plan. She'd prepared a detailed list of supplies Mike would need, along with written instructions for wound care and signs to watch for that might indicate complications with the pregnancy. "I've also called a colleague in Oklahoma City," Sarah told him, handing him a business card. "Dr. Alan Peterson. He's expecting your call when you get back. I've emailed him Mercy's records and ultrasound images." Mike tucked the card into his wallet. "I appreciate that, and all of this," he added, gesturing to the pages of instructions. "I know this isn't exactly standard procedure." Sarah smiled. "Nothing about this situation is standard, but I'm glad Mercy found you. Too many of these cases don't end well." "You said you've seen this kind of thing before? Abandoned horses?" Sarah's expression darkened. "More often in recent years. The economy gets tight, hay prices go up, and suddenly that horse someone bought on impulse becomes an expense they can't, or won't, maintain. But Mercy's case is particularly egregious. Those injuries didn't happen by accident. Do you think someone will come looking for her?" The thought had been nagging at Mike all morning. "It's possible, though I doubt it. Whoever did this was trying to get rid of her, not lose her temporarily." Sarah hesitated, then added, "The sheriff's department took my report and they'll file the necessary paperwork. But cases like these rarely get much attention. After the holding period expires, 30 days in this county, she'll legally be considered abandoned property. And then she'll go to whoever has been caring for her, which in this case would be you, assuming you follow through with your plan." Mike nodded, his resolve strengthening. "I'm following through." Sarah studied him for a moment, then seemed to come to a decision. "Let me give you my personal cell number, in case you have questions or concerns once you're back in Oklahoma, day or night." As she wrote her number on the back of a clinic business card, Mike felt an unexpected warmth spread through his chest. It wasn't just about Mercy anymore. There was something about Sarah herself, her compassion and straightforward manner that drew him in. "I might just take you up on that," he said, accepting the card. Their eyes met briefly, and Mike thought he saw a flicker of something more than professional concern in her gaze, but before he could be sure, the moment was broken by the arrival of one of the vet techs with a question about another patient. The afternoon passed quickly as Mike made preparations for the journey. He purchased the supplies Sarah had recommended from the clinic store in a nearby feed shop, stocking up on specialized feed for pregnant mares, first aid supplies, and a proper halter to replace his makeshift rope creation. Around 5 o'clock, Mike's phone buzzed with a text from Jake. "Just crossed into Tennessee, ETA 7:30. True to his word, Jake pulled into the clinic parking lot at 7:25, the headlights of his pickup illuminating the gathering dusk. Behind the truck was a two-horse trailer, weathered but well-maintained. Jake himself was a barrel-chested man in his early 50s, with a salt-and-pepper beard and the weathered complexion of someone who spent most of his life outdoors. "You must be the horse whisperer," he called out as he climbed down from the cab, extending a meaty hand toward Mike. "Jake Brennan." "Mike Wilson. Thanks for coming all this way, Jake." "Don't mention it. Linda's been after me to take a road trip anyway." Jake grinned, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "Though I think she had someplace more exciting than Tennessee in mind." Mike had known Jake casually for years. He was the neighbor who kept an eye on Mike's property when he was on the road, but they'd never spent much time together. Now, as Jake helped him load the supplies into the pickup and walked with him to see Mercy, Mike found himself appreciating the man's steady, unquestioning support. "So this is the lady that caused all the fuss," Jake said when they reached Mercy's stall. His tone was light, but his eyes were serious as they assessed the mare's condition. "She's been through the ringer, hasn't she? Found her standing in the middle of I-40 during that storm last night," Mike explained. "Someone tied her up and left her to die." Jake's expression hardened. "Some people don't deserve the air they breathe," he muttered. Then, his voice softening, he added, "She's a beauty, though. Thoroughbred, maybe some Arabian in the mix. Good bloodlines, I'd bet money on it." "You know horses?" Mike asked, surprised. "Raised and trained quarter horses most of my life before the arthritis got too bad," Jake replied with a shrug. "Still help out at my sister's ranch when I can. Horses get in your blood." Mike felt a rush of relief. Jake's experience with horses would be invaluable in the coming days and weeks. Sarah returned as they were discussing the logistics of loading Mercy into the trailer the next morning. She'd changed from her clinic attire into jeans and a simple green sweater that brought out the flecks of gold in her hazel eyes. Mike found himself noticing details he'd been too exhausted to register earlier. The graceful curve of her neck, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was thinking. "Dr. Morgan, this is my neighbor Jake Brennan," Mike said, dragging his attention back to the matter at hand. "He's helping me get Mercy back to Oklahoma." Sarah shook Jake's hand. "It's good to meet you, Mr. Brennan. I was just coming to let you all know that the clinic closes at 9, but I've arranged for Mercy to stay overnight. I'll be here in the morning at 6 to check her one more time before you leave." "That's mighty kind of you, Doctor," Jake said with a nod of appreciation. "Call me Sarah, please." "Sarah," Jake repeated with a smile. Then, glancing between her and Mike with a knowing look, he added, "I think I'll go check the trailer one more time. Make sure everything's set for tomorrow. Mike, I'll meet you at the motel afterward." As Jake departed, leaving Mike and Sarah alone beside Mercy's stall, an awkward silence fell between them. Mike cleared his throat. "He seems to think," he began. At the same moment, Sarah said, "Your friend is very—" They both stopped, then laughed, the tension broken. "Jake knows horses," Mike said. "That's going to be a big help, since my experience is limited to what I remember from helping my dad when I was a kid." Sarah nodded. "You're lucky to have him, and Mercy's lucky to have you." There it was again, that warmth in her eyes that made Mike feel like maybe he was doing something right for once. "I was thinking," Sarah continued, "if you wouldn't mind some company, I could follow you for the first few hours tomorrow, just to make sure Mercy's handling the journey okay." Mike felt his heart skip a beat. "I'd appreciate that more than you know." The next morning dawned clear and cool, a perfect day for travel. Mike arrived at the clinic at 5:45, eager to get started but anxious about the journey ahead. He found Sarah already there, her hair pulled back in a ponytail, wearing jeans and a light jacket. She was checking Mercy's vital signs one last time. "She looks good," Sarah announced as Mike approached. "Temperature normal, wounds healing nicely. I've removed the IV since she's drinking well on her own now." "So we're good to go?" Mike asked, trying to mask his nervousness. "As good as we can be." Sarah handed him a small cooler. "I've packed some additional antibiotics and pain medication. The instructions are inside, along with my colleague's information again, just in case." Jake arrived a few minutes later with coffee and breakfast sandwiches for everyone. "Figured we could all use some fuel for the road," he said, passing them around. The three of them stood in companionable silence, sipping coffee and watching Mercy munch contentedly on her morning hay. The mare seemed stronger today, her eyes brighter and more alert. Mike took it as a good sign. Loading Mercy into the trailer proved easier than expected. Jake had brought some apple slices, and with gentle coaxing and the promise of treats, Mercy followed him up the ramp with only minor hesitation. Mike felt a surge of pride as she settled into the padded interior without signs of distress. "She trusts you," Sarah observed, standing beside him as he secured the trailer door. "That's no small thing after what she's been through." "I think she's just glad to be cared for," Mike replied, though her words warmed him. With Jake taking the semi back to the depot in Nashville and then continuing to Oklahoma, the convoy was set. Sarah would follow Mike in her SUV for the first leg of the journey. They agreed to stop after 2 hours to check on Mercy, and then Sarah would decide whether to continue further or turn back. The first miles passed uneventfully. Mike drove with unusual care, hyper-aware of every bump and curve in the road, imagining how each might feel to the pregnant mare in the trailer behind him. He checked his rearview mirror frequently, reassured by the sight of Sarah's blue SUV following steadily behind. At their planned stop, a roadside rest area just past the Kentucky border, Mike pulled in and parked in the oversized vehicle section. Sarah pulled up beside him, and together they went to check on Mercy. The mare greeted them with a soft nicker, seemingly untroubled by the journey so far. She accepted the water Mike offered and showed interest in the surroundings visible through the trailer's small windows. "She's doing remarkably well," Sarah said, sounding impressed. "Better than I expected, honestly." Mike felt relief wash over him. "So we can keep going?" "I think so. Let's stop again in another 2 hours, but if she continues like this, I'm optimistic." They took the opportunity to stretch their legs, walking together along a short nature trail behind the rest area. The path wound through a stand of oak trees, dappled sunlight filtering through the leaves overhead. "So," Sarah said after they'd walked in silence for a minute, "I know why you're a truck driver. Family business, right? But why stick with it? It seems like a lonely life." Mike considered the question, surprised by her perception. "It is lonely sometimes," he admitted, "but there's a freedom to it that I've never found anywhere else. Just me and the open road, new places every day." He paused, then added, "After my parents died, car accident 6 years ago, the farm felt too empty, too full of ghosts. Driving helped." Sarah nodded, understanding in her eyes. "I get that. After my divorce, I threw myself into my work for similar reasons. Empty house, too many memories." "How long ago was that?" "The divorce," Mike clarified. 3 years this August." Sarah's tone was matter-of-fact without bitterness. "He was a surgeon, always working. Eventually, we just became strangers living in the same house. I'm sorry." Sarah shrugged. "Don't be. It led me here, to my own practice, to a life I actually chose rather than fell into." She glanced at him. "Sometimes the hardest changes end up being the best ones." Mike thought about her words as they circled back to the parking lot. Was that what was happening now? A hard change that might lead to something better? The idea was both terrifying and exhilarating. Back on the road, Mike found himself thinking about Sarah more than he probably should. There was something about her quiet competence, her kindness that never veered into pity, the subtle humor that occasionally broke through her professional demeanor. It had been a long time since he'd felt this kind of connection with anyone. They stopped again just past Louisville, in another rest area with enough space for the trailer. This time, Mercy seemed slightly restless, shifting her weight more frequently and flicking her tail in apparent discomfort. "Is something wrong?" Mike asked, immediately concerned. Sarah examined Mercy carefully before answering. "I don't think it's anything serious. She's probably just stiff from standing in the trailer for so long. Pregnancy makes everything more uncomfortable." She ran her hands over Mercy's swollen belly. "The foal is active, which is good. But I think we should give her a longer break this time. Maybe let her walk a bit if there's a safe area." They found a grassy patch behind the rest area, enclosed by a decorative split-rail fence. It wasn't secure enough for a determined horse, but with both of them holding lead ropes attached to Mercy's halter, they felt confident letting her stretch her legs a bit. Mercy seemed grateful for the opportunity, walking with slow, measured steps and occasionally stopping to graze on the lush Kentucky bluegrass. Watching her, Mike felt a sense of peace he hadn't experienced in years. "This is the right thing, isn't it?" he asked Sarah suddenly. "Taking her back to Oklahoma, I mean. I'm not just being selfish, wanting to keep her." Sarah considered the question seriously. "I think it's right," she said finally. "She needs stability, care, someone who's committed to her well-being. You're offering her that. The alternative would be a rescue organization, which might be wonderful or might not be, depending on their resources and expertise." "I don't have much expertise," Mike pointed out. "But you care. That counts for a lot." Sarah smiled at him. "And you're not afraid to ask for help, which counts for even more." They led Mercy back to the trailer after about 20 minutes, the mare moving more easily after her brief exercise. As they prepared to get back on the road, Sarah hesitated beside her SUV. "I was planning to turn back at this point," she said, "but I'm a little concerned about how she's doing. Would you mind if I continued with you a bit further? I could follow you to Nashville at least, make sure she's still stable before heading back." Mike couldn't help the smile that spread across his face. "I wouldn't mind at all." The look Sarah gave him suggested she knew exactly how pleased he was by her decision, but she didn't comment on it. Instead, she simply said, "Let's get going then. We're burning daylight." As they pulled back onto the highway, Mike found himself whistling an old country tune, something his father used to sing when they worked together in the stable. For the first time in longer than he could remember, the road ahead seemed full of possibility rather than endless sameness. All because of a black mare who had appeared like a ghost in the storm, changing everything. Nashville appeared on the horizon just after midday, the city skyline shimmering in the distance. Mike had arranged to meet Jake at a truck stop on the outskirts of the city, where they'd confirmed that the semi had been properly dropped off at the depot and Jake would continue his journey back to Oklahoma. "There he is," Mike said, spotting Jake's familiar figure waiting beside his pickup in the parking lot. He pulled in beside him, and Sarah parked her SUV on the other side. "How's our girl doing?" Jake asked as they approached, nodding toward the trailer. "Better than expected," Mike replied. "But we're taking it slow, lots of breaks." While Mike and Jake discussed the logistics of the semi-drop-off, Sarah checked on Mercy again. The mare seemed comfortable enough, though she was drinking more water than earlier, which Sarah noted with a slight frown. "Everything okay?" Mike asked, noticing her expression when he returned. "Just something to keep an eye on," Sarah said. Increased thirst can sometimes indicate the early stages of labor, but it could also just be the stress of travel or the warmer weather. Jake raised an eyebrow. "Early labor? Should we be worried?" "Not necessarily," Sarah replied. First-time mares, and I'm assuming Mercy is one based on her age and build, can show pre-labor signs for days or even weeks before actually foaling. But we should be vigilant. Jake nodded, then glanced at his watch. "I should get going if I want to make it to Memphis by nightfall." He clasped Mike's shoulder. "Call me when you stop for the night. Let me know how she's doing." After Jake departed, Mike and Sarah decided to take a longer break, giving Mercy a chance to rest properly before continuing their journey. There was a small city park nearby with a secluded grassy area where they could safely let Mercy out of the trailer again. As they watched Mercy grazing contentedly a few yards away, both holding on to long lead ropes, Mike found himself studying Sarah's profile. The midday sun highlighted the copper strands in her dark hair, and there was a softness in her expression as she watched the mare that made something tighten in his chest. "You never said how far you're planning to come with us," Mike said, breaking the comfortable silence. Sarah tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, a gesture he was coming to recognize. "I was thinking Memphis," she said, not meeting his eyes. "It's about a 3-hour drive back from there, which is manageable. I've got appointments tomorrow afternoon I can't reschedule." "Memphis is good," Mike said, trying to hide his disappointment that she wouldn't be with them for the entire journey. "We'll probably stop there for the night anyway." Sarah turned to face him fully. "Mike, I have to ask, what's your plan once you get Mercy back to your farm? Long term, I mean." It was a fair question, one he'd been considering himself. "The farm's been in my family for 3 generations, he began. "It's not large, 40 acres, most of it pasture. My dad kept a few horses when I was growing up, but after he and Mom passed, I didn't have the heart to keep them. Sold them to good homes." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "The stable's still there, though. Needs work, but the structure's sound. There's a paddock, good fencing around most of the property. My neighbor, not Jake, but an older lady on the other side, Mrs. Holloway, she keeps goats, says she'd be happy to check on Mercy when I'm on the road." "And your job? You'll still be driving long haul?" Mike nodded slowly. "For now, but I've been thinking about cutting back, maybe switching to regional routes that would let me be home more often. I've got enough saved that I could take a few months off completely, get Mercy settled, be there when the foal comes." Sarah smiled, and the warmth in it reached her eyes. "You've really thought this through." "I'm trying," Mike admitted. "This whole thing still feels crazy sometimes, but then I look at her." He nodded toward Mercy, "and somehow it makes perfect sense." "I know exactly what you mean." Their eyes met, and Mike felt the connection between them deepen. Without overthinking it, he reached out and took her hand. Sarah's fingers curled around his, warm and sure. They stood like that for a long moment, neither speaking, both watching Mercy as she grazed peacefully in the dappled sunlight. The moment was broken by Mercy herself, who suddenly raised her head, ears pricked forward, and let out a low, anxious whinny. Her sides heaved once, twice, and then she pawed at the ground, seeming agitated. Sarah released Mike's hand and moved quickly to Mercy's side. "Easy, girl," she murmured, running practiced hands over the mare's swollen belly. "What's going on?" Mike joined her, concern evident on his face. "Is it the foal?" Sarah frowned in concentration. "I can't be sure, but I think she might be experiencing Braxton Hicks contractions, essentially false labor. It's common in the last weeks of pregnancy, but with her stressed condition, we need to be careful." Mercy continued to show signs of discomfort, shifting her weight and occasionally pawing at the ground. Sarah checked her vitals, then stepped back with a sigh. "Her pulse is elevated, but that's to be expected if she's uncomfortable. I don't think she's in active labor, but we should get her somewhere more controlled than a public park." "What do you suggest?" Mike asked, feeling out of his depth. Sarah thought for a moment. "I know a vet in Nashville, an old colleague from vet school. Let me call him, see if he can meet us at his practice. He specializes in equine reproductive health." Within 20 minutes, they had Mercy loaded back into the trailer, and were following Sarah's GPS directions to a large equine veterinary practice on the outskirts of Nashville. Dr. Richard Taylor, a tall, thin man with prematurely gray hair and kind eyes, met them at the entrance. "Sarah Morgan," he said warmly, embracing her. "It's been what, 5 years?" "At least," Sarah replied with a smile. "Thanks for seeing us on such short notice, Rich." Dr. Taylor led them to a spacious examination room designed specifically for horses. With practiced efficiency, he examined Mercy thoroughly, paying special attention to her reproductive state. "You're right about the Braxton Hicks," he told Sarah after completing his assessment. "She's not in active labor, but her body is definitely preparing. I'd estimate she's got 2 to 3 weeks left, possibly less given the stress she's under." "Is it safe for her to continue traveling?" Mike asked anxiously. Dr. Taylor considered this. "If you take it very slow with frequent breaks, yes, but I wouldn't push it more than absolutely necessary. Where are you headed?" "Oklahoma," Mike replied. "About 8 more hours of driving, the way we've been going." "That's doable, but I'd split it over at least 2 days, maybe 3, and I'd stick to morning and early afternoon driving only. Heat stress combined with pregnancy can be dangerous." While Dr. Taylor prepared some preventative medications for Mercy, Sarah pulled Mike aside. "Change of plans," she said decisively. "I'm coming with you all the way to Oklahoma." Mike stared at her in surprise. "What about your appointments tomorrow?" "I'll call my associate. Have her cover for me. This is more important." Sarah's expression was determined. "Mercy needs both of us right now." The relief that flooded through Mike was so intense, it left him momentarily speechless. He simply nodded, grateful beyond words that he wouldn't have to face the rest of the journey and whatever it might bring alone. They left Nashville later than planned, with Dr. Taylor's medications for Mercy and strict instructions to call him if anything changed. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the highway as they headed west, the landscape gradually flattening as they approached the Mississippi River. Sarah followed closely behind Mike's pickup in her SUV, both of them maintaining a steady, careful pace for Mercy's sake. By the time they reached Memphis, the sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. Mike had called ahead to a small motel on the outskirts of the city that advertised horse-friendly accommodations, essentially a parking area adjacent to a fenced paddock where travelers could safely keep their horses overnight. It wasn't fancy, but it would allow Mercy to spend the night outside the trailer, which both Mike and Sarah agreed was important. The motel owner, a weathered older man named Earl, helped them settle Mercy in the paddock, which had a small 3-sided shelter in one corner. "Gets plenty of folks passing through with show horses," he explained, securing the gate. "Started offering the paddock about 10 years ago. Good for business." Mercy seemed relieved to be out of the trailer, walking the perimeter of the paddock with curious interest before settling near the shelter to munch on the hay Mike had provided. "She looks more comfortable already," Sarah observed as they leaned against the fence, watching the mare in the fading light. Mike nodded, feeling some of the day's tension ease from his shoulders. "You think she'll be okay overnight?" "I do. The paddock is secure, she has shelter, water, and food, and we're right here if anything happens." Sarah turned to face him. "You should get some rest, Mike. You've been going non-stop for almost 2 days now." "You must be exhausted too," he replied, noticing the fatigue in her eyes despite her professional demeanor. "I still can't believe you're coming all the way to Oklahoma with us." Sarah smiled, her face softened by the twilight. "Neither can I, to be honest. It's not exactly my usual MO to drop everything and take off across the country with a man I just met and a pregnant horse." "What is your usual MO?" Mike asked, genuinely curious. Sarah laughed softly. "Work, mostly. The clinic keeps me busy 6 days a week. On my day off, I usually catch up on medical journals, maybe go hiking if the weather's good, Exciting stuff. Sounds a lot like my life, minus the medical journals, Mike admitted. Work, sleep, repeat. Not much time for anything else. And yet here we are, throwing our routines out the window for a horse we've known less than 48 hours. She's special, Mike said simply. She is, Sarah agreed. But I think it's more than that. I think sometimes life has a way of shaking us out of our patterns when we need it most. Mike considered this, watching as Mercy lowered herself carefully to the ground, stretching out her legs in apparent contentment. You might be right about that. They checked Mercy one more time before heading to their respective rooms, making sure she had plenty of water and was showing no signs of distress. Mike found himself reluctant to say goodnight to Sarah, but exhaustion was catching up with both of them. I'll see you in the morning, Sarah said, pausing at her door, which was 2 down from his. 6 o'clock? We should get an early start before it gets too hot. 6 it is, Mike agreed. And Sarah, thank you for everything. She smiled, and for a moment Mike thought she might say something more. Instead, she simply nodded and disappeared into her room. Despite his exhaustion, sleep didn't come easily for Mike. His mind was too full of the events of the past 2 days, of Mercy and her unborn foal, and increasingly, of Sarah Morgan. When he finally did drift off, his dreams were a confusing mix of storm-drenched highways, running horses, and hazel eyes that seemed to see right through him. He awoke before his alarm, the gray light of pre-dawn filtering through the thin motel curtains. After a quick shower, he headed outside to check on Mercy. To his surprise, Sarah was already there, leaning against the paddock fence with 2 cups of coffee in hand. Morning, she greeted him, offering one of the cups. Earl starts the coffee pot at 5 a.m. apparently. Bless him, Mike said fervently, accepting the steaming cup. How's our girl? See for yourself. Mike looked over at Mercy, who was standing calmly in the center of the paddock, watching them with those intelligent dark eyes. In the pale morning light, he could see that her coat was already looking healthier, the cuts and scrapes less angry than they had been just days ago. She's a quick healer, he observed. Good nutrition and proper care make a world of difference, Sarah replied. But yes, she's recovering remarkably well, all things considered. They sipped their coffee in companionable silence for a few minutes, watching as the sky gradually lightened. Finally, Sarah spoke again. I've been thinking about your farm, she said. You mentioned it's been in your family for generations. Mike nodded. My grandfather bought it back in the 40s, after he returned from the war. Started with just a few acres, but he gradually added to it over the years. My dad took over in the 70s, expanded the stables, kept a small herd of cattle for a while. And now it's yours, Sarah said. Do you ever think about doing more with it than just living there between roots? The question caught Mike off guard. It wasn't that he hadn't thought about it. He had, especially on long, lonely stretches of highway. But he'd never really voiced those thoughts aloud. Sometimes, he admitted, I've thought about getting back into horses, maybe boarding a few for extra income. The land's good, plenty of pasture, but it always seemed like a pipe dream, something for someday. Maybe someday is closer than you think, Sarah suggested gently. Mike met her gaze, struck by how easily she seemed to read his unspoken thoughts. Maybe it is. As the sun crested the horizon, they prepared to continue their journey. Mercy loaded into the trailer more willingly this time, as if she understood that they were taking her somewhere safe. With Memphis behind them, they crossed the mighty Mississippi and entered Arkansas, the landscape changing subtly as they headed west. They stopped more frequently now, every hour instead of every 2, giving Mercy breaks from the confines of the trailer. At one such stop, a rest area with a grassy field behind it, Sarah checked Mercy's vital signs again. Her temperature's up slightly, she reported, frowning. "Nothing alarming yet, but we need to watch it carefully." "Should we find another vet?" Mike asked, immediately concerned. Sarah shook her head. "Not necessary right now. Let's just make sure she stays hydrated and doesn't get overheated. We'll stop more often if needed." Back on the road, Mike found his thoughts returning to what Sarah had said about the farm. For years, he'd kept the place as a sort of museum to his parents' memory, changing as little as possible, as if altering anything might somehow erase their presence. But now, with Mercy coming into his life, he was beginning to see the farm differently, not as a memorial to the past, but as a place with a future, with possibilities he hadn't allowed himself to consider. And increasingly, when he imagined that future, Sarah was part of it. The thought both terrified and exhilarated him. The Arkansas landscape rolled by outside the windows, a patchwork of farmland and forests under a cloudless blue sky. The heat was building as midday approached, and Mike kept a watchful eye on the trailer's thermometer, which Sarah had insisted on installing to monitor Mercy's environment. So far, the temperature remained within acceptable limits, but Mike knew it would only get warmer as the day progressed. They had settled into a rhythm now: drive for an hour, stop for 15 minutes to check on Mercy, and let her stretch her legs if possible, then back on the road. Sarah continued to follow in her SUV, occasionally calling Mike's cell phone with observations or suggestions. Her calm, professional demeanor was reassuring, anchoring him whenever worry about Mercy threatened to overwhelm his thoughts. At their latest stop, a small roadside park near the town of Russellville, Mike noticed Sarah frowning as she examined Mercy. "What is it?" he asked, immediately alert to any change in Sarah's usually composed expression. "She's breathing a bit more rapidly than I'd like," Sarah replied, pressing a stethoscope to Mercy's side. "And her heart rate is elevated. Could be the heat, could be stress from the journey, or, Mike prompted when she didn't continue. Sarah straightened up, tucking the stethoscope back into her bag. "Or it could be early signs of labor. It's still too soon to tell for certain." The word labor sent a jolt of anxiety through Mike. "What do we do if it is? We're in the middle of nowhere." "Let's not get ahead of ourselves," Sarah said, her voice deliberately calm. "It's more likely just heat stress. We'll keep a closer eye on her, stop more frequently, and make sure she stays hydrated. And we'll find a motel early today, someplace where she can rest properly overnight." Mike nodded, trusting Sarah's judgment even as concern gnawed at him. "Whatever you think is best." Back on the road, Mike found himself gripping the steering wheel tighter than necessary, his mind racing with worst-case scenarios. What if Mercy went into full labor in the middle of rural Arkansas? What if there were complications? What if the foal didn't survive or Mercy didn't survive? His phone rang, pulling him from his spiraling thoughts. Sarah's name flashed on the screen. "Hey," he answered, grateful for the distraction. "You're driving like you're in a funeral procession," Sarah said without preamble. "I can practically see the worry radiating off you from back here." Despite his anxiety, Mike chuckled. "That obvious, huh? Like a neon sign. Listen, Mercy's going to be fine. She's strong, she's getting the best care possible under the circumstances, and we're going to get her to your farm before anything dramatic happens." "You sound pretty confident," Mike said, feeling some of the tension ease from his shoulders. "I am confident. I've delivered hundreds of foals, many in far less ideal conditions than what we can provide. And Mercy's vital signs, while worth monitoring, aren't actually at concerning levels yet." "So why did you look so worried back there?" There was a pause before Sarah answered. "Professional caution. It's my job to consider all possibilities, prepare for the worst while hoping for the best, but I should have been clearer with you. I'm sorry if I caused you unnecessary stress." "No, I appreciate your honesty," Mike assured her. "I'd rather know what we might be facing." They talked for a while longer, Sarah skillfully steering the conversation away from immediate concerns to more general topics. Her veterinary school days, Mike's early years of trucking, funny stories from both their professions. By the time they ended the call, Mike was feeling considerably more relaxed. Around 3 in the afternoon, they crossed into Oklahoma, the Welcome to Oklahoma sign standing proud against the prairie landscape. For Mike, it felt significant, like crossing a threshold not just between states, but between his old life and whatever lay ahead. "Almost home," he murmured, glancing in the rearview mirror at the trailer carrying Mercy. His home state looked particularly beautiful today, the late spring sunshine gilding the rolling hills and giving the whole scene a dreamlike quality. They stopped again just past the border, at a small family-owned gas station with a grassy area behind it. The elderly proprietor, seeing the horse trailer, waved them toward a shaded spot at the edge of the property. "Folks with animals always welcome," he called out cheerfully. "Got a water spigot back there too if your horse is thirsty." Mike thanked him, touched by the small-town hospitality that was so characteristic of rural Oklahoma. As he and Sarah tended to Mercy, who did indeed seem grateful for the fresh water, Mike found himself telling her about his childhood in this part of the country. "My dad used to take me fishing at a lake not far from here," he reminisced, watching as Mercy drank deeply from the bucket they'd provided. "He was a man of few words, my dad, but he'd always open up when we were out on the water. Told me all about his own childhood, his dreams for the farm, the future he imagined for our family." "He sounds like a good man," Sarah said softly. "The best," Mike agreed. He would have loved Mercy. He had a special way with horses, could calm even the most skittish colt just by being near it. "Sounds like someone else I know," Sarah said with a smile, nodding toward Mercy, who was now leaning into Mike's touch as he stroked her neck. Mike felt a surge of emotion at her words. "I hope I can live up to his example. He built something real, something lasting. All I've done so far is maintain it, and not always well at that." "That's not true," Sarah countered, her voice firm. "You've kept the farm going through difficult times, and now you're doing something your father would be proud of, giving this mare a second chance, a home where she and her foal can thrive." Mike met her gaze, struck by the conviction in her voice. "Thank you for saying that." "I'm just stating facts," Sarah replied, but her eyes were warm. As they prepared to get back on the road for the final leg of their journey, Mike made a decision. "Would you like to see the farm?" he asked Sarah. "Not just drop us off, I mean, but really see it. Maybe stay a day or two, help get Mercy settled." Sarah's smile lit up her entire face. "I'd like that very much." The rest of the afternoon passed peacefully as they made their way through eastern Oklahoma, stopping whenever necessary to check on Mercy, whose condition remained stable despite the earlier concerns. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, they turned off the main highway onto a series of increasingly rural roads. "Almost there," Mike said into his phone, Sarah once again following in her SUV. "Just another 20 minutes or so." He could hear the smile in her voice when she replied, "Lead the way." As they rounded a final bend in the road, the Wilson family farm came into view. The white 2-story farmhouse stood unchanged from Mike's childhood memories, its wraparound porch and green shutters welcoming even from a distance. The red barn and stable complex sat 100 yards away, surrounded by oak trees that had been saplings when his grandfather first bought the property. It wasn't a show place, nothing fancy or pretentious, but seeing it now through fresh eyes, through Sarah's eyes, through Mercy's needs, Mike felt a surge of pride and possibility that he hadn't experienced in years. "Welcome home, Mercy," he said softly, pulling into the long gravel driveway that led to the farm. "Welcome home." Dusk was settling over the farm as Mike and Sarah worked together to unload Mercy from the trailer. The mare stepped cautiously onto the gravel driveway, her ears pricked forward with interest as she took in her new surroundings. Mike watched her carefully, looking for any signs of distress, but Mercy seemed more curious than afraid. "Let's get her settled in the stable for tonight," Sarah suggested. "Tomorrow we can show her the paddock and pasture when there's better light." Mike nodded in agreement, leading Mercy toward the barn while Sarah gathered their medical supplies. The old wooden structure stood solid against the darkening sky, its familiar silhouette bringing back a flood of memories for Mike. It had been too long since he'd spent real time here, he realized. Too many quick visits between routes, dropping off supplies for Mrs. Holloway, making hasty repairs before heading back on the road. The interior of the stable was dusty, but otherwise in good condition. Mike had called ahead to Mrs. Holloway, who had prepared one of the larger stalls with fresh bedding and filled the water trough. The elderly woman had also left a note saying she'd be by in the morning to meet the new addition, along with a basket of fresh eggs and homemade bread for Mike and his lady friend. "Your neighbor sounds thoughtful," Sarah remarked, reading the note with a smile. "She's been a godsend," Mike admitted, leading Mercy into the prepared stall. "Watches over the place, keeps me updated on anything that needs fixing. I don't know what I'd do without her." Mercy explored her new home, sniffing at the straw bedding and investigating the corners of the spacious stall. After a few circuits, she seemed to approve, lowering her head to drink from the water trough. "She seems to like it," Sarah observed, setting up her medical supplies on a small table outside the stall. "I hope so," Mike replied, watching as Mercy continued her exploration. "This was my dad's pride and joy, this stable. He built most of it himself, expanded it over the years as his horse collection grew. At one point, we had 8 horses here." "What kind?" "Mostly quarter horses. Dad bred them for a while, sold a few foals each year. Nothing fancy, but good solid stock." Mike ran his hand along the smooth wooden post worn by years of use. "He always said horses kept him sane, gave him purpose." Sarah nodded, understanding in her eyes. "They have a way of doing that." After checking Mercy's vital signs one more time, all stable to their relief, and making sure she had plenty of food and water for the night, they headed toward the house. The old farmhouse welcomed them with creaking floorboards and the lingering scent of lemon furniture polish, a testament to Mrs. Holloway's caretaking. "It's not much," Mike said, suddenly self-conscious as he showed Sarah around the first floor. "But it's home." "It's lovely," Sarah replied, her gaze taking in the comfortable living room with its worn leather sofa, the kitchen with its vintage appliances, the family photos that lined the hallway. "It has character, history. That's something you can't buy or build overnight." Mike relaxed a bit at her genuine appreciation. "There's a guest room upstairs, second door on the right. Bathrooms across the hall. I'll bring your bags up." While Sarah freshened up, Mike threw together a simple dinner from the supplies Mrs. Holloway had stocked in the refrigerator: omelets made with the fresh eggs, toast with homemade jam, and a salad of mixed greens. By the time Sarah came downstairs, the table was set and the food was ready. "This looks wonderful," she said, taking a seat across from him. "I didn't know truck drivers could cook." Mike grinned. "When you grow up on a farm, you learn to be self-sufficient. Besides, it's just eggs." They ate in companionable silence for a few minutes, both hungrier than they'd realized after the long day of travel. Through the open window, the night sounds of the farm drifted in: crickets chirping, the distant hoot of an owl, the occasional soft nickering from Mercy in the stable. "It's so peaceful here," Sarah said, leaning back in her chair. "I can see why your family held on to it for so long." "It is peaceful," Mike agreed. "Sometimes too peaceful, if I'm being honest. After my parents died, the silence got to be too much. That's part of why I threw myself into long-haul driving. Always moving, always something new to see." Sarah nodded thoughtfully. "I understand that. After my divorce, I did something similar. took on extra shifts at the clinic, volunteered at animal shelters on my days off, anything to avoid going home to an empty house. "And now?" Mike asked, genuinely curious. "Now I'm learning to appreciate the quiet again," Sarah said with a small smile, "to see it as peaceful rather than empty." After dinner, they decided to check on Mercy one more time before turning in for the night. The spring air had cooled considerably, and Sarah wrapped herself in a light jacket Mike had lent her, the sleeves hanging comically past her fingertips. The stable was dark except for the single light they'd left on over Mercy's stall. The mare was lying down when they entered, but immediately rose to her feet at the sound of their approach, nickering a greeting. "She recognizes us already," Mike said, pleased. Sarah checked Mercy's temperature and listened to her heart and lungs, nodding with satisfaction. "Everything seems stable. Her breathing has slowed to a normal rate, which is good. I think she's settling in well." As they stood watching Mercy, who had returned to munching contentedly on her hay, Mike found himself acutely aware of Sarah standing beside him, the faint scent of her shampoo, the way his jacket dwarfed her smaller frame, the comfortable silence between them that needed no filling. "Thank you," he said suddenly, turning to face her, "for coming all this way, for helping with Mercy, for everything." Sarah met his gaze, her eyes reflecting the soft light from the stable lamp. "You don't need to thank me. I wanted to come." There was something in her voice, a warmth that went beyond professional courtesy or even new friendship, that made Mike's heart beat a little faster. Slowly, giving her plenty of time to step away if she wanted to, he leaned forward and kissed her. It was a gentle kiss, tentative at first, but when Sarah's arms wrapped around his neck, pulling him closer, it deepened into something more certain. When they finally broke apart, both were slightly breathless. "I've been wanting to do that since Lebanon," Mike admitted, his hand still resting lightly on her waist. Sarah laughed softly. "I've been hoping you would." A sudden noise from Mercy's stall broke the moment. The mare was pawing at the ground, her tail swishing back and forth in apparent agitation. Sarah immediately went to her, professional concern replacing the personal warmth of seconds before. "What is it, girl?" she murmured, opening the stall door and approaching Mercy carefully. Mike followed, anxiety creeping back into his chest. "Is she okay?" Sarah didn't answer immediately, her focus entirely on Mercy as she ran practiced hands over the mare's swollen belly. After a tense minute, she stepped back with a sigh. "More Braxton Hicks contractions, I think. Her muscles are tightening, but it's not consistent enough to be true labor yet." She stroked Mercy's neck soothingly. "Still, she's definitely moving closer. The foal has dropped position a bit since this morning." "What does that mean?" Mike asked, coming to stand beside her. "It means we probably have days rather than weeks," Sarah replied. "She's preparing. The foal is getting into position for birth." Mike swallowed hard, the reality of the situation suddenly hitting home. Soon, very soon, he wouldn't just be responsible for Mercy, but for her foal as well. A new life, completely dependent on his care. "We should set up a foaling kit," Sarah continued, practical as always. "Tomorrow we'll gather everything we might need, clean towels, iodine for the umbilical cord, a few other supplies, just to be prepared." Mike nodded, grateful once again for her calm competence. "Whatever you think we need." As they left the stable, leaving Mercy to rest as comfortably as possible, Mike couldn't help but feel that his life had somehow come full circle. This farm, which had once represented loss and emptiness to him, now held the promise of new beginnings, not just for Mercy and her foal, but perhaps for him as well. The next few days settled into a comfortable routine. Sarah extended her stay, calling her associate to cover the clinic for the remainder of the week. Together, she and Mike prepared for Mercy's impending foaling, gathering supplies, setting up a makeshift foaling stall with extra bedding, and reading the monitors Sarah had installed to track Mercy's vital signs. During the daylight hours, they introduced Mercy to the paddock and eventually to the larger pasture, watching with satisfaction as she explored her new domain. The mare seemed to gain strength with each passing day, her coat beginning to regain its glossy sheen, her eyes bright and alert. Only her swollen belly, now lower and more pronounced than ever, served as a reminder of the imminent arrival. Mrs. Holloway, a spry woman in her 70s with silver hair and keen blue eyes, became a daily visitor, bringing fresh baked goods and staying to help with farm chores. She took an immediate liking to Sarah, proclaiming her exactly what this place has been needing, with a significant glance at Mike that made him blush like a schoolboy. In the evenings, after checking on Mercy one last time, Mike and Sarah would sit on the porch swing, talking late into the night. He told her about his parents, about growing up on the farm, about the dreams he'd once had for this place before grief and loneliness had driven him to the open road. She shared stories of her own childhood in rural Vermont, her journey through veterinary school, and her ambitions for her small clinic. "I've been thinking," Mike said on the third night, as they watched fireflies blinking in the darkness beyond the porch. "About the farm, about what it could be." Sarah turned to him, her interest evident. "Oh? I've got all this land, a good stable, pasture that's barely being used." Mike gestured toward the shadowy outlines of the fields. "Maybe it's time I did something with it. Not just keeping it as a memorial to my parents, but making it something new." "What are you thinking?" Sarah asked, her voice soft in the darkness. "A rescue, maybe, for horses like Mercy, abandoned, abused, in need of a second chance." The idea had been forming in his mind for days, becoming clearer each time he watched Mercy grazing peacefully in the paddock. "I've got savings, enough to get started. Could renovate the stable, improve the fencing, maybe even build an indoor arena eventually." Sarah's hand found his in the darkness, her fingers intertwining with his. "I think that's a wonderful idea, Mike. Your father would be proud." The warmth of her approval settled in his chest, solidifying his resolve. It would mean cutting way back on the long-haul driving, maybe switching to local routes only, being here more. "Is that what you want?" Sarah asked, her thumb tracing small circles on the back of his hand. "Yeah," Mike said, the certainty in his voice surprising even him. "Yeah, it is." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the porch swing creaking gently as they rocked. Finally, Sarah spoke again, her voice hesitant for the first time since he'd met her. "I've been thinking too," she said, "about distance and proximity." Mike waited, sensing she needed to find her own words. "Lebanon's not that far from here. 3 hours, maybe less with good traffic." She turned to face him, her expression serious in the dim light. "I could come up on weekends, help with the rescue. Maybe even open a satellite clinic here eventually if there's enough demand." The implication of her words, that whatever was growing between them might have a future, sent a surge of hope through Mike. "I'd like that," he said simply. "I'd like that a lot." Their lips met in a kiss that held promise and possibility, both of them aware that something extraordinary had begun with a chance encounter on a storm-swept highway. The call came at 3 a.m, 5 days after their arrival at the farm. The monitoring system Sarah had set up in Mercy's stall let out a sharp beep, jolting them both from sleep. "It's time," Sarah said, already pulling on her clothes. "Her water's broken." They raced to the stable, flashlights bobbing in the pre-dawn darkness. Inside, they found Mercy, lying on her side in the straw, her sides heaving with contractions. Sarah immediately went into professional mode, checking the mare's progress while Mike set up the additional lights they'd prepared for this moment. "She's progressing normally," Sarah reported, her voice calm and steady. "The foal is positioned correctly from what I can tell. All we can do now is wait and be ready to assist if needed." Mike nodded, taking his position at Mercy's head, stroking her neck and murmuring reassurances as she labored. The mare's eyes, usually so calm, were wide with the effort and discomfort of birth. But there was trust there too. Trust in the humans who had saved her from abandonment and brought her to this safe place. The labor progressed steadily, Mercy's contractions growing stronger and closer together. Sarah maintained a running commentary for Mike's benefit, explaining each stage of the process, preparing him for what would come next. "There," Sarah exclaimed suddenly, "I can see the amniotic sac. The foal's coming." Mike held his breath as Mercy gave a massive push, and suddenly there were two tiny hooves emerging, encased in the translucent birth sac. With each contraction, more of the foal appeared, first the legs, then the nose, and finally, with one tremendous effort from Mercy, the entire body slid into the world. "It's a filly," Sarah announced, quickly clearing the membrane from the newborn's nose and mouth. "A beautiful black filly just like her mother." Mercy twisted her head around to see her baby, nickering softly in greeting. The sound seemed to invigorate the foal, who began struggling to rise almost immediately, her spindly legs splaying in the straw as she attempted to find her balance. Mike watched in awe as Sarah guided the wobbly foal toward Mercy's side, helping her find her mother's milk. The miracle of it, this new life, so determined and perfect, brought unexpected tears to his eyes. "She's perfect," he managed to say, his voice thick with emotion. Sarah looked up at him, her own eyes shining. "She is, and so is her mother." They stayed with the new family until dawn, making sure both mare and foal were healthy and bonding properly. As the first rays of sunlight filtered through the stable windows, illuminating the touching scene of mother and baby, Mike felt a profound sense of rightness settle over him. This was where he belonged, not alone on endless highways, but here, rooted in the land his family had tended for generations, creating something meaningful and lasting. And perhaps not alone after all, if the way Sarah leaned against him, her head resting on his shoulder, as they watched the foal take her first tentative steps, was any indication. "What will you name her?" Sarah asked softly. Mike considered the question, watching the black foal as she nursed from Mercy, her tiny tail swishing with contentment. In the short time since her birth, she had already shown a remarkable spirit, determined, brave, resilient. "Hope," he said finally. "Her name is Hope." Sarah smiled, reaching for his hand and squeezing it gently. "Perfect." Outside, the new day was dawning bright and clear over the Wilson farm. In the pasture, dew glistened on the lush spring grass that would soon nourish Mercy and her foal. In the distance, the highway stretched toward the horizon, the same highway that had brought a desperate mare and a lonely truck driver together on a stormy night, changing everything. But for now, in the quiet of the stable, with new life before them and new possibilities between them, Mike and Sarah simply watched as Hope took her first steps into the world, a world that suddenly seemed full of promise.